Good morning, first grade. This week we're going to read a book called Zinnia and Dot. Before we get started, I want to share with you 2 vocabulary words that you're going to see in the story. The first word you're going to see is vain. Vain is a person who cares about how they look and thinks that they are the best at everything. The next word you're going to see is alabaster. Alabaster is an adjective, and it's used to describe something that is smooth and white. Like this vase is alabaster because it's smooth and white. Can you think of anything at your house that is alabaster? Let's get started with the story Zinnia and Dot. 2 hens, Zinnia and Dot, lived in an old chicken coop. Both were very fat and even more vain. You would think that since they spent most of their time alone, they would have been friends, but they were not. In fact, they rarely spoke to one another. One morning, Zinnia broke the silence. "My eggs are the most beautiful in the world," she said with a long, slow drawl. "They are as smooth as silk." Dot raised her chicken eyebrows. "No, no, my dear," she clucked. "My eggs are the most beautiful. They shimmer like pearls." "But mine are like alabaster," said Zinnia. "Mine are as pure as new-fallen snow," crooned Dot. On and on the hens fussed, each insisting she had the loveliest, most brilliant, most perfect eggs. "Of course, my chicks will hatch to be gorgeous as their mother," Dot said at last. She jumped to the coop floor and strutted in the sunlight. Zinnia was not to be outdone. She fluttered across the hay, displaying her brilliant feathers. "What beautiful chicks I will have," she said. The hens were so busy admiring themselves that they did not notice who sat at the chicken coop window. It was a weasel. Passing by, he had heard the bragging hens and stopped to see what might develop. All happened just as he hoped, and the weasel now saw his chance. What do you think's going to happen next? Crash! The weasel burst into the window, wildly racing through the chicken coop. He overturned nests and scattered straw. It was poultry pandemonium. Then just as suddenly as the weasel had appeared, he was gone. Zinnia and Dot picked themselves up. The air was perfectly still. All seemed to be as it was before. But returning to their nests, the 2 hens gasped. Their eggs were gone. "This is all your fault!" each hen accused the other. "You were the one who started it all," Dot shouted. "I never would have left my nest if you hadn't been showing off," Zinnia shot back. Behind them, there was a gentle bump, the sound of something rolling. Zinnia and Dot turned around. There in the middle of the floor was one last egg. 2 chicken voices shrieked at once, "That's my egg!" What a fight now began. Zinnia knew without a doubt that it was her egg. Dot was just as certain that it was hers. Each refused to admit that the egg could possibly belong to the other. Finally, 2 mourning doves at the window interrupted. "Please," called one of the doves, "that poor egg is getting cold. If you don't come to an agreement soon, there will be no chick to argue over. Maybe you could share it." Dot and Zinnia eyed each other suspiciously. "Share? Never!" Still, the egg was getting cold. "Fine," Zinnia said. "I will sit on it first, and then you may." "No, me first," said Dot, "then you." Sharing was not something that either Zinnia or Dot did well. "When the egg hatches, the baby chick will look just like me," Dot declared. "Then we will know whose egg it is." "Yes, we will know," Zinnia snapped, "but it will look like me because it is my egg." Finally, even these 2 grew weary of quarreling, each knowing that nothing would ever change the other's mind. An icy silence filled the air. Days passed. The mourning doves sometimes stopped by the chicken coop to see how the hatching was progressing. There Zinnia and Dot sat, unmoving, refusing to even acknowledge that the other was there. "Why not entertain one another?" suggested one dove. "Sing some songs, tell some stories." "Ha!" cried Zinnia. "The only story I'll tell is about me and my baby chick leaving this coop." "Oh no," Dot hissed back. "I will be the one leaving with my baby chick." Again the hens sat in silence, brooding over what lay ahead. Now, all this time, the weasel had been thinking about just one thing, the egg he left behind. And the longer he thought about it, the more he could not rest until he had returned to claim it. "While I'm there, I might as well eat those 2 old hens," he growled, setting out for the chicken coop. The 2 old hens, meanwhile, grew more irritable with each passing second. They only spoke to complain. "Stop humming! Stop wiggling! Move over!" Tempers were short, and that is when the fly buzzed through the broken window. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Around and around and around he buzzed again and again until each hen thought she would scream. When the fly buzzed past Dot's beak, Zinnia flung out her wing. Zinnia missed the fly. Zinnia hit Dot. "That does it!" shouted Dot. She jumped to the floor, dragging Zinnia with her. The weasel saw his chance. Crash! Through the window he came. At first Dot and Zinnia froze. Then they turned on the weasel. "Stop him!" shouted Dot. "Don't let him near the nest!" screeched Zinnia. One jumped on the weasel's back, the other on his head. They seemed all beaks and claws. Squawk! Cluck! Yelp! The weasel leaped and rolled and snapped, but he could not get rid of the battling chickens. He struggled back to the broken window, jumped out, and disappeared. The exhausted hens collapsed on the coop floor. "We did it," Dot said. "We scared the weasel away." Zinnia shook her head. "Who would have thought we could be so brave?" The hens, giddy from their victory, cackled as they sat back down on their nest. "One hen could never have done it," declared Dot. For once, Zinnia agreed. "Lucky we both were here," she said. The thought made both hens cackle again, so hard they cried. "Shh, listen," Dot whispered. A tiny tap, tap, tap could be heard underneath them. "Our egg!" they shouted. Dot and Zinnia huddled at the edge of the nest, watching. First, tiny cracks appeared on the egg. Time passed. The hours seemed like days. At last, pieces of shell fell off one at a time, and finally the egg fell apart. A wet, bony, very naked-looking baby chick emerged. "He's beautiful," gasped Zinnia. "He's gorgeous," agreed Dot. Zinnia leaned closer. "His beak looks just like yours," she declared. "But his feet look just like yours," insisted Dot. The baby chick cheeped back at the 4 eyes above him. "He's perfect," Dot and Zinnia sang. Never before was a baby chick so loved, growing up with not 1 but 2 mother hens. That's not to say Zinnia and Dot always got along. They didn't. But they did learn to be friends. And on the most important thing, their baby. They agreed 100%. He was the loveliest, most brilliant, most perfect chick in the world. And that was really all that mattered.